In the second unit of this course, we're moving on to how archaeologists use inference to understand more complex societies. These are societies not unlike our modern nation states, characterized by social inequality, permanent leadership positions with institutionalized authority, and the division of the economy into many specialized roles and services. As we saw in the previous unit, the social and economic organization of mobile foraging societies is relatively egalitarian. While there is some division of labor based on sex and age, everyone who is able participates in subsistence activities, and no one has any special privileges. In addition, decisions within the group are made by consensus. There are no full-time leaders with the authority to tell others what to do. Some individuals with greater experience or expertise may step up to provide leadership when their skills are needed, but their tenure is limited to that task. And while individuals who consistently outperform their peers may be honored for their accomplishments and recognized as exceptional individuals, these achieved statuses are not hereditary and are not passed on to the next generation. Thus, everyone is born equal in an egalitarian society with the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else. At the opposite end of the spectrum are societies with very complex and generally unequal systems of socioeconomic organization. The economy consists of many different subsistence tasks, and each household performs only a small part of them, creating interdependencies within society marked by specialized production and exchange. Further, complex societies are typically characterized by social inequality. There are some high-ranking individuals who are not directly engaged in subsistence at all, yet they have greater rights and prerogatives to resources than other members of society. These are the rulers, the chiefs and kings, who are destined to lead by virtue of having been born in the right family, and whose ascribed status as elite individuals is often marked by wealth and greater prestige from birth. This high-status class typically owns most of the productive resources, such as agricultural land, within the society, and they are supported by the labor of a lower class and dependent peasants or commoners, who have few rights and little possibility of social mobility. The origins of complex societies have generated considerable research and debate. One of the questions archaeologists puzzle over is when and how systems of social and economic inequality emerged. Why would a society accept a situation in which some members are considered inherently more important and more valuable than others? Did societies voluntarily enter into such arrangements, perhaps for the managerial benefits leaders might provide? Or were these inequalities first established through war and conquest and the subjugation of one group by another? Further, changes in social and economic organization appear linked to processes of increasing political integration and centralization. In particular, both social stratification and economic specialization appear to follow the foundation of state-level polities. But were these changes actually initiated by the new governments, or somehow enabled by the new political environment? The Valley of Oaxaca in southern Mexico is one region where archaeologists have studied these questions intensively. Over the next 3 weeks, we will introduce you to Oaxaca, to some of its famous sites, and let you explore the debate on the origins of complex societies there. Along the way, we'll introduce you to some essential skills in ceramic analysis, which we will use to examine ceramic assemblages found in formative burial contexts and infer the degree of social inequality in Oaxaca over time. In the first week of this unit, we'll focus on the analysis of pottery, one of the most common and useful artifact types for sedentary complex societies. Start your reading with Chapter 9 by E.B. Banning, which provides a good overview of pottery production and technology, as well as some of the methods archaeologists use to describe and analyze pottery. Read this chapter first, then review the lecture tutorial to build your skills. Next, we'll return to the topic of complex societies in general, and the Valley of Oaxaca in particular. The required reading for this part of the course is Ancient Oaxaca, a synthesis of over 40 years of research in Oaxaca by Richard Blanton, Gary Feynman, Stephen Kowalewski, and Linda Nicholas. In order to keep up with the class discussion, I recommend that you read Chapter 1 during Week 4, Chapters 2 and 3 for Week 5, and Chapters 4 and 5 for Week 6. As you read their account, keep in mind that it represents just one theoretical perspective or model of how complex societies emerged. There are other views. For our purposes, however, we are more concerned with how they arrived at their interpretations, that is, how these researchers move from the data collected in the field to inferences about the origins of socio-political complexity in the Valley of Oaxaca. Moving on, in Week 5, we'll talk about models for the evolution of social complexity and how we can infer social inequality in the archaeological record. We'll use your skills in ceramic analysis to examine possible differences in status and wealth based on the number and quality of ceramic pots found in individual burials from one early site, Santo Domingo Tomaltepec in Oaxaca. In week 6, we'll put it all together. We'll start with current models for the timing of the emergence of complex societies in the Valley of Oaxaca and the processes that may have led to social inequality, economic specialization, and political centralization within the valley. Finally, we'll examine the temporal evidence for the emergence of social inequality based on our burial data and household assemblages that represent periods of important social and political change at Tamaltepec. Throughout this unit, the emphasis will be on how we operationalize complex concepts such as socioeconomic inequality, that is, how we define their archaeological correlates. Once these correlates have been specified, the challenge is to see whether they are visible in the archaeological record in order to make inferences about specific case studies in the past, such as Oaxaca. Let's start now with a quick introduction to the Valley of Oaxaca as a research area. The Valley of Oaxaca was home to the Zapotec civilization and later the Mixtec civilization. Elements of both these civilizations were present in the valley at the time of the Spanish conquest, and their descendants still live in the valley and surrounding highland regions today. The Valley of Oaxaca is located within the Oaxaca culture region within the southern highlands of Mexico. It represents a flat, fertile area surrounded by steep mountains, and so it was a center of settled agricultural life early in the prehistory of Mesoamerica. The valley itself is approximately 100 kilometers, or 62 miles from north to south, and consists of 3 distinct arms, Etla in the north, Tlacolula to the east, and Ocatlan-Zimitlan to the south. The Ocatlan-Zimitlan area is often called the Valle Grande, or Large Valley, because it provides the broadest expanse of flat agricultural land. The valley floor sits at 1,500 meters, and the surrounding mountains rise to over 4,000 meters. But because Oaxaca is so far south, the climate is mild, even at high elevations. Frosts are uncommon, and the nickname for Oaxaca City, the capital of the state, is the City of Eternal Spring. On the other hand, sufficient rainfall for agriculture is a problem. Oaxaca experiences a marked wet season, May through October, and a dry season, November through April, which limits agricultural productivity. Soil productivity also varies markedly within the valley. Today, the northern and southern arms focus on subsistence farming, while the eastern arm, which has droughty, sandy soils, is home to massive fields of agave and major distilleries for the manufacture of mezcal and tequila. The Valley of Oaxaca has been the focus of intensive archaeological research. Scientific investigations began with the excavations directed by Mexican archaeologist Alfonso Caso, credited with being the discoverer of the site of Monte Alban. Between 1931 and 1939, Caso and his colleagues Ignacio Bernal and Jorge Acosta conducted the first survey and mapping of the site, followed by excavations within major mounds of the central plaza. They uncovered a series of administrative, religious, and habitation structures, as well as some of the famous tombs from the site. Their stratigraphic excavations also established the relative chronology for the site based on ceramic wares and types, which are still used by archaeologists today. The chronology for Monte Alban, as delineated by Caso, Bernal, and Acosta, consisted of 5 main phases, designated Monte Alban 1, representing the earliest material encountered at Monte Alban, through Monte Alban 5, the latest material at the site, as shown in the right-hand column of the chart. Some of these phases have been subdivided and transitional phases have been added, but we still use their sequence and diagnostic ceramic types or phase markers. Subsequent work in other parts of the valley, however, encountered ceramic types not represented at Monte Alban, and it became clear that there was a long history of occupation in the valley prior to the founding of the Zapotec capital. To avoid confusion, or adding to it, depending on how you want to look at it, the entire chronological sequence was given a new set of names. These are shown in the middle column. Finally, it is necessary to recognize that the Valley of Oaxaca did not exist in isolation, but was clearly interacting with other regions and was part of a general sequence of developmental changes. These are indicated in the left-hand column, Mesoamerican period. Across Mesoamerica, the formative period is seen as the adolescence of the region, spanning the growth from the earliest settled agricultural villages up to early complex societies, including complex chiefdoms and early states. Beginning in the 1960s, archaeologists became interested in the Valley of Oaxaca as a case study for the emergence of complex societies. Oaxaca was recognized as one of the earliest state-level societies in the New World. Over the next 2 decades, several major projects undertook to document the history of occupation and socio-political developments within the valley. One major project was the Prehistory and Human Ecology Project of the Valley of Oaxaca, directed by Kent Flannery of the University of Michigan. The goal of this project was to move beyond the focus on just Monte Alban as the capital of the Zapotec state and shed light on developments within the valley from the perspective of other smaller sites. The excavations at the villages of Santo Domingo Tomaltepec and Fábrica San Jose were part of this project, as were investigations at the regional center of San Jose and Mogote. Although much of their research focused on the northern, or Etla arm, it provided a detailed perspective on socio-political changes in this region, leading up to and paralleling the founding of Monte Alban. A second project, directed by the team that wrote your text, Ancient Oaxaca, undertook a comprehensive settlement survey to document all pre-Hispanic sites within the valley based on surface scatters of artifacts and the remains of architectural features. Using a field-by-field reconnaissance technique, over 2,700 sites were located and then mapped, all without the advantages of GPS or GIS technology. The survey teams also collected representative ceramics so that the sites could be assigned a chronological phase, and they estimated the extent of each site and the density of artifact scatters as a means to estimate population size. As the survey teams later noted, it would probably have been easier to map the areas without ceramics. However, the end result was a set of maps for the entire valley that enabled researchers to track where population was located through time, and that provided good information on site size, architectural complexity, and the range of economic activities taking place at the site. Working within the cultural ecology paradigm, these early studies were initially interested in understanding man-land relationships, that is, how natural resources within the valley affected how population was distributed. Not surprisingly, for example, they found that the rich agricultural soils of the Ela arm were one of the earliest areas settled, and that this arm supported the largest population through much of the formative period. But these data sets were also used to shed light on man-man relationships, that is, socio-political developments within the valley. For example, architectural features consisting of the foundations and collapsed walls of a former structure often appear as mounds on the surface. Small mounds may represent a single domestic structure or a house, while large mounds may represent a substantial public building, requiring the labor of the larger community to construct. The size of mounded architecture is therefore a potential indicator of the size of the workforce, and the size of the workforce gives us some indication as to whether a leader would have been required to coordinate the construction effort. In review, our current understanding of the development of social complexity in the Valley of Oaxaca is derived from three lines of evidence. First, stratigraphic excavations and comprehensive survey at Monte Alban. Second, excavations at smaller sites and secondary centers outside the Zapotec capital. And finally, comprehensive regional settlement surveys of the entire valley. As you read through your text on Ancient Oaxaca, think about the kinds of data the researchers rely on to make their arguments, and how they bridge from the archaeological record to interpretations of the past. Which lines of data are most important for tracking social organization? Which lines of data are utilized to shed light on political organization? And most importantly, what are the linking arguments that the authors use to connect the archaeological evidence to their interpretations of the past?